somewhere in the northern Ural Mountains of Russia. There is a place that doesn't appear on most tourist maps. A pass between two peaks. Cold, silent, and impossibly remote. The locals call it Holat Syakhl. In the language of the indigenous Mansi people, that name translates to one thing: Dead Mountain. In January of 1959, 9 experienced hikers entered that mountain. They were young. They were trained. They had done this before. They left behind journals, photographs, campfires, and letters to the people they loved. None of them came back alive. And more than 60 years later, no one has ever fully explained what happened to them. Not really. The Soviet investigation called it an unknown compelling force. But the deeper people looked into the case, the stranger it became.
To understand what happened on that mountain, you first need to understand the people who entered it. Their leader was Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old, intelligent, careful, experienced. The others trusted him completely. There was Zenaida Kolmogorova, always smiling in photographs. Lyudmila Dubinina, passionate, emotional, intensely alive. Alexander Zolotarov, a veteran of World War II, quiet, mysterious, always carrying a camera. Yuri Krivonishenko, Yuri Doroshenko, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, Alexander Kolovatov, Rustam Slobodin. 9 people. Healthy, skilled, experienced hikers. None of them knew they were walking toward one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in history. The early days of the expedition were normal, cold, but manageable. They joked together, took photographs, wrote in their journals, laughed around campfires. Looking at those photographs today feels almost unbearable, because you know something they didn't. You know none of them are coming home. On February 1st, 1959, weather conditions became worse. Snowstorms covered the mountain. Visibility dropped. And somehow, the group drifted slightly off course. They found themselves exposed on the slope of Holat Syakhl, Dead Mountain. Igor Dyatlov made a decision. Instead of descending toward the safety of the forest, they would camp directly on the mountain. It was the last decision he ever made. They pitched the tent, ate dinner, wrote in their diaries, and eventually, they went to sleep. Then, something happened.
something terrifying enough to make 9 experienced hikers flee into a frozen wilderness in the middle of the night. Without shoes? Without coats? Without protection? In temperatures approaching negative 30 degrees Celsius. They cut their way out of the tent from the inside and ran into the darkness. When the group failed to return, search teams entered the mountains weeks later. And what they found disturbed even experienced rescuers. The tent was still standing, half buried beneath snow. Inside were their belongings, clothes, equipment, food, everything left behind. But the tent itself had been sliced open from the inside. Long cuts through the fabric. Deliberate. Violent. As if something inside that tent had terrified them so badly, escaping through the entrance wasn't fast enough. Below the tent, investigators found footprints in the snow. Calm footprints. Not chaotic, not frantic, just silent tracks leading away from the campsite toward the forest. At the edge of the trees, they found the first 2 bodies. Yuri Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko. Barely clothed, frozen beside the remains of a small fire. Nearby branches had been broken high above the ground, as if someone had desperately climbed the tree, trying to see something in the darkness. Months later, the final 4 bodies were discovered beneath deep snow in a ravine. And this is where the mystery becomes truly disturbing. Their injuries were catastrophic. Massive skull fractures, crushed ribs, internal trauma so severe, investigators compared it to the impact of a car crash. But strangely, the skin above many of the injuries remained almost untouched. Lyudmila Dubinina's tongue was missing. Parts of her face were gone. Official reports blamed decomposition. But many investigators were never satisfied with that explanation. Even stranger, some clothing showed traces of radiation. Radiation in the middle of a frozen mountain. In a case the Soviet government would later seal from the public. Over the decades, dozens of theories emerged. Avalanches, secret military experiments, weapons testing, infrasound capable of causing panic and hallucinations. Some researchers believed the hikers encountered a natural disaster. Others believed the Soviet military was hiding something. And some people believed something else was waiting on that mountain. Witnesses reported strange lights in the sky during the weeks surrounding the incident. Orange glowing objects moving silently above the mountains. Several investigators later admitted the case never felt normal.
One investigator would eventually describe the evidence using a single word: phenomenon.
Among the items recovered from the expedition, investigators found cameras. Most photographs were ordinary. Friends smiling, snow-covered landscapes, moments frozen in time. But one image stood out. A grainy photograph taken at night. Distorted. Overexposed. Showing what appeared to be a strange light source in the darkness. No one knows who took the photograph or what they were trying to capture. But the possibility remains that in the final moments before something terrible happened, one of them looked into the darkness and raised a camera. Officially, the Soviet investigation concluded with a single explanation: an unknown, compelling force. Nothing more. The case was sealed. The questions remained. And Dead Mountain kept its silence. Maybe the most frightening part of the Dyatlov Pass incident isn't what we know. It's how much we still don't. 9 people entered those mountains. Something happened there. And whatever it was, it never told us why. If you made it this far, thank you. Stories like this stay with people because they never truly end. If this is the kind of darkness you want to keep exploring, subscribe to Molodix. Every video on this channel dives into mysteries the world never fully explained. And in the comments, tell me your theory. What do you think happened on that mountain? Until next time, stay curious, stay unsettled, and remember, the mountains remember everything.